Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm doing my updated 2026 US Senate elections predictions that I do every single month. So today's video I'll be doing the Senate map. I'll also have videos coming out after this for the governor and House map as well. So for this Senate map I'm going to go through every state and give my current prediction on where I have things standing right now. First we're going to start in the West Coast with the state of Oregon. Oregon, this is going to be Democratic incumbent Senator Jeff Merkley. The incumbent's intent is not known if he's going to be running again or not, but this race is fully expected to be a safe Democratic race. When you look at the last Senate race in Oregon, it was back in 22. The other Democrat, Wyden, won by 14.9%. 2020, Merkley won by about 17.6%. So barring a surprise or another candidate entering this race that would really shake things up, Oregon's going to be a safe Democratic win without too much of a problem. Now I'll go down to the state of Alaska before coming back up to Idaho. Alaska, this is going to be Republican incumbent Senator Dan Sullivan. He is running for re-election. He's currently the only declared Republican in this race. Alaska is interesting because back in 2020, Dan Sullivan won by about 12.7%, a likely Republican win. 2022, Lisa Murkowski won by 7.4%. The good news for Sullivan is that there does not appear to be any big-name Democrats running against him in this race, so I expect Dan Sullivan to win by over 15% of the vote, making it safe Republican. Now we have the state of Idaho. Idaho, one of the most Republican states in the country. U.S. Senator Jim Risch is running for re-election. Recent election results have shown Idaho to be a very safe state, voting for Risch by 29.4% in 2020. Fully expect it'll be another safe Republican win. Now to the state of Montana. Montana is an interesting state because we did see a very close election just last year. This is where Democratic incumbent Senator Jon Tester lost to Republican challenger Tim Sheehy by a likely Republican margin. But in 2020, when we saw Steve Daines go up against Steve Bullock, it was a 10-point win. So both of the last two elections in Montana have been likely Republican, but they also had strong Democrats running against the Republicans. This time around, Steve Daines, he's not officially said he's running again, but fully expect that he will. The only Democrat that's running right now is Riley Neal, who's a member of the Democratic Party and was the first candidate to file for governor in 2020, not as high profile as Tester or as Bullock. I expect Montana will be safe Democrat this time around. Now the state of Wyoming. Wyoming, one of the most Republican states in all of the United States, with Republican incumbent Cynthia Lummis. No primary challengers mentioned at this time. Wyoming went for Lummis by 45 points back in 2020. Fully expect Wyoming to be a safe Republican state. Now we have the state of Colorado. Colorado, this is another state that's trended towards the Democratic side in recent years. It used to be a very competitive toss-up state. Now, not really so much. This is Democrat incumbent John Hickenlooper, the former governor of the state, now senator, was elected in 2020. 3 Democrats currently running, no notable Republicans have jumped in. We saw Hickenlooper win by 9.3% against the Republican incumbent Cory Gardner back in 2020. In 2022, Michael Bennet, the other senator from Colorado, won by 14.6%. It's very possible this one goes over 15% of the vote, and I'm just about shy of doing it. I'm putting it as likely Democrat, but I think it's within like 1 point of going over that 15% margin of victory threshold. New Mexico, kind of in a similar situation to Colorado. This is going to be Democratic incumbent Senator Ben Ray Lujan. He is running again. No other candidates have been mentioned at this time. New Mexico in 2024, Martin Heinrich, the Democratic senator, won re-election by about 10.1%, a likely Democratic win. Back in 2020, Ben Ray Lujan won by 6.1%. So I think we're going to see New Mexico this time around continue to be a Democratic Senate seat, but I think it does stay under that 15% margin of victory threshold, making it likely Democratic. Now for South Dakota. South Dakota, that's the governor map. Here we go, South Dakota. This is a Republican incumbent, Mike Rounds. He is, the incumbent's intent is not yet known, but still, this is a very Republican state. South Dakota voted for Rounds by 31.5% back in 2020. We're going to see South Dakota go safe Republican again in 2026. The state of Nebraska, this could get very interesting depending on who the candidates end up being in this race. So if you're not familiar, Nebraska in 2024 had a very close Senate race due to the fact that independent Dan Osborne ran against the Republican incumbent Deb Fischer. This time around, Pete Ricketts is up for re-election. He will likely perform stronger than Deb Fischer did in this race, but that election got very close. It was a 6.7% win for Fischer over Osborne. Ricketts is currently 25.2%. The way I'm going to characterize this race is until Osborne enters the race, because if he doesn't enter, I think Nebraska is going to be a 15% or more safe Republican win. If Osborne does decide to enter this race, I'll shift the state in my next rankings down to likely Republican, because that is where I think it starts out. But until he enters, I'm going to have the state starting as safe Republican. Now to the state of Kansas. Kansas, which is going to be a Republican incumbent Senator Roger Marshall, who's not yet made a decision if he's running again or not. I believe he won by a relatively large margin back in 2020. He won by 11.4% against the Democrat Bollier. In 2022, we saw the other Senate race from Moran go Republican by about 23 points. I think this time around we see Kansas go safe Republican. Oklahoma, here it is, the Oklahoma Senate race. This is going to be Republican incumbent Senator Mark Wayne Mullen. Again, he has not officially made his intent known on what he'll be doing for 2024, but in 2022, Langford and Mullen won by safe Republican margins. Without a doubt, fully expect Oklahoma will be going safe Republican again. Texas is going to be very fascinating because Texas, this is Republican incumbent Senator John Cornyn, and he is facing a very tough primary challenge from Republican Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton. And right now in the early polling, it shows that Ken Paxton's actually leading over John Cornyn in most of the polls. So it's possible that Ken Paxton does defeat the Republican incumbent Senator John Cornyn to become the Republican nominee. But what the early polling has also showed is that Ken Paxton has actually been doing worse against his potential Democratic opponents than John Cornyn has. So just to give you a little bit of my thought process here, right now for Texas, I have it for John Cornyn would be likely Republican. Ken Paxton is right around likely Republican and lean Republican. So for right now, until Paxton wins the primary, I'm going to have it be likely Republican. But I think we're certainly moving into that category of Texas maybe being one of the top competitive races heading into 2026 if Paxton does indeed win that Republican primary. Next, we'll move to the state of Louisiana right next door. Louisiana is going to be Republican incumbent Senator Bill Cassidy. Several Republicans are running, trying to primary out Bill Cassidy. Cassidy voting against President Trump a lot in the U.S. Senate. Republicans are fed up with him. Will that succeed? We'll have to wait and see how that goes. But from an electability standpoint, in 2022, the other Senator John Kennedy won by 43 points. In 2020, Cassidy won by 40.3. Regardless, we're going to see a safe Republican win out of the state of Louisiana. The state of Arkansas, we're also going to see, in all likelihood, a safe Republican win. This is Republican Senator Tom Cotton. There is a Democrat running against him, which I don't believe back in 2020 there was a third-party candidate that ran against him where he won by 33 points. The other senator won by 34 in 2022. Arkansas will be a safe Republican win. Now we have the state of Iowa with Republican incumbent Senator Joni Ernst. This is expected to be one of the more closer Senate races to watch for in 2026. Joni Ernst, who some approval polls have shown she's not particularly super popular in Iowa, is facing both two Republican primary challengers and three Democratic candidates in Nathan Sage, J.D. Schulten, and Zach Walz. Democrats are feeling very optimistic in this race that the three Democratic candidates, one of the three, will be the nominee and be a very strong candidate. As for Iowa's voting history, in 2022, Chuck Grassley won by 12.2% against the Democrat Franken. In 2020, however, Joni Ernst only won by 6.5%. Democrats are looking at that 2020 election against Joni Ernst and hoping to replicate that, and maybe in a more Democratic-friendly election environment in 2026, hoping to capitalize on that. Right now, I don't think I'm ruling out the possibility of Iowa becoming really competitive, but I'm starting it out as lean Republican right now, kind of in a similar category as Texas. But I would not be shocked come Election Day seeing Iowa end up being a little bit under 5% margin of victory for Ernst, as his campaign has the potential to get very, very close. Now the state of Minnesota. Minnesota, this is going to be Democrat incumbent Tina Smith. She is retiring, so it is an open race. Right now, two Democrats are running, Angie Craig, U.S. Representative, and Peggy Flanagan, the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota. On the Republican side, Adam Schwarzy and Royce White, the Republican nominee for the Senate in 2024, though he got blown out in a very big victory for Democrat Amy Klobuchar, 15.7% against White. Tina Smith back in 2020 only won by 5.2% against the Republican Lewis in a much more close election. This time around, I think Amy Klobuchar is kind of a special case. In Minnesota, I think we're going to see Minnesota go in the likely Democratic category under 15% of the vote. This puts the Republicans at 43, Democrats 38, with 19 seats remaining. Mississippi, the state of Mississippi, Republican Cindy Hyde-Smith is running again. She is facing a Democratic opponent and potential Republican, primary opponent as well. But Mississippi, very red. In 2020, only voting for her by 10 points, actually. But in 2024, the other Senate seat going for Wicker by 25.6%. It is possible it could maybe be a little bit under 15 points, but I think she holds on and wins by a safe margin. The state of Alabama, this is going to be Republican incumbent Senator Tommy Tuberville, who is retiring in 2026, so it will be an open race on the Republican and Democratic side. But Alabama is one of the most Republican states in the United States. 2022, Katie Britt won by 35 points. 2020, Tuberville won by 20.4 against the Democratic incumbent at the time, Doug Jones. Alabama is going to be a safe Republican Senate seat without too much of a doubt in 2026. Now for the state of Tennessee. Tennessee, this is going to be Republican incumbent Senator Bill Hagerty. He is running for re-election. In Tennessee, kind of like Alabama, very Republican state. Hagerty won by 27 points in 2020. 2024, Marsha Blackburn won by 29.6. We're going to see Tennessee be safe Republican once again in 2026. The state of Kentucky. Kentucky, this was Republican, or is Republican, Senator Mitch McConnell. He's retiring and will not be running for re-election in 2026. We have an open race right now. A handful of Republicans are currently running, including Andy Barr, Daniel Cameron, Nate Morris, and Michael Farris. The only Democrat is Pamela Stevenson at this time. But again, Kentucky, very Republican state as well. 2022, Rand Paul won by 23 points. 2020, McConnell won by 19.5. Whoever the Republican nominee ends up being, I expect will win this state by more than 15% of the vote. Now for the state of Illinois, this is Democratic incumbent Dick Durbin. He is also retiring, so there's an open race as well. 3 Democrats are running: Robin Kelly, Raja Krishnamurthy, and Juliana Stratton, and a handful of Republicans are also running. Illinois, though, is a very solidly Democratic state. In 2022, Tammy Duckworth won by 15.3%. 2020, Dick Durbin won by 16%. It's possible it goes a hair under 15% of the vote, but I think for right now, Illinois starts out in the safe Democratic category. Now we'll go back down south and work our way up. In the state of Florida, this is a special election to fill the remainder of the term for Republican Senator Marco Rubio. Ashley Moody, the Attorney General of Florida, was appointed to this race. She is not running for re-election. Jake Lang, a Republican, is also running. There is some speculation that other Republicans could jump in this race over the next few months and year or so. Democrat Josh Wheel is the only candidate running at this time. Florida, a long ways away from being that toss-up state, is now a much more solid Republican state, voting for Marco Rubio by 16 points in 2022. In 2024, Rick Scott winning by about 12.8%, and what the polls looked like could be a competitive race. Scott ended up winning by a very large margin. Florida could go safe Republican, could go likely Republican. It's right around that bordering line. I'm going to start it out as safe Republican in this rankings. Now we have the state of Georgia. Georgia is going to be one of the closest Senate races in the country in 2026. This is Democratic incumbent Senator Jon Ossoff. He's up for re-election. He dodged a major bullet by not having Georgia Governor Brian Kemp run against him. Now the Republican side is kind of wide open, looking to find who can run against Ossoff. John King, Buddy Carter, and Reagan Boggs are all running right now. The last few Senate elections in Georgia have been very close, but the Democrats have prevailed, with Raphael Warnock winning by 2.8% in 2022 and Jon Ossoff winning by 1.2% in 2020. Warnock, again in that special election, 2.1%. This race, I think, is going to be very close, and certainly both parties can win it. In today's rankings right now, given the Republicans' lack of a strong, unified candidate to go up against Ossoff, right now I have the state starting out in the lean Democratic category, but that is certainly one that I'm watching very, very closely. Now we have the state of South Carolina. This is going to be Republican incumbent Senator Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, who is running again, is facing a few Republican primary challengers and a few Democratic challengers as well, including Catherine Fleming Bruce. So this is going to be a potentially interesting race. As we did see back in 2020, Graham only win by 10.3% against Democrat Jamie Harrison, though Tim Scott did win re-election by 25.9%. Lindsey Graham is certainly the weaker of the two South Carolina senators in terms of electoral strength. But again, having the endorsement of President Trump already, assuming Graham doesn't have any problems in the primary, I think he wins South Carolina by a pretty strong, safe margin. Now for North Carolina, another state that's expected to be one of the most competitive Senate races in the country. This is Republican incumbent Senator Thom Tillis, and this time all eyes are on the Democratic nominee, where Roy Cooper, the former governor of North Carolina, has been rumored to be a potential candidate. If he enters this race, I think that alters how this race goes. Right now, Willie Nickel, the former U.S. representative from North Carolina, is the former nominee or former U.S. House representative in North Carolina, is seen as the likely Democratic nominee unless Cooper enters. This race is going to be very close regardless. As we saw in 2022, the Senate race go for Ted Budd by 3.2%. Tom Tillis only won by 1.7% in 2020 with a lot of third-party vote splitting that election as well. In my rankings right now, if Roy Cooper jumps in this race versus Tom Tillis, I actually have it going for the Democrats by under 1 point. If Roy Cooper does not enter this race, it ends up being Tom Tillis versus Willie Nickel. I have Tom Tillis narrowly winning this race by about 0.5 percentage point. So until Cooper enters this race, I'm going to leave it as tilt Republican, but him entering would change the rating I have for this Senate seat. Now we have the state of Virginia. Virginia, this Democratic incumbent Mark Warner, he has not yet made his intentions known, but he's been 3 times reelected now in the state of Virginia. In 2020, he won by 12.1% against the Republican Gade. Tim Kaine, the other Democratic senator from Virginia, won by 8.9% in 2024. I think we see Virginia be in a very similar category as 2020 and 2024. Virginia starts out as likely Democratic. Now the state of West Virginia. West Virginia, this is going to be Republican Shelley Moore Capito. She's not yet said if she's running for re-election or not, but West Virginia is one of the most Republican states in the country, electing Republican Jim Justice for Senate in 2024 by 41 points. This will be a safe Republican win without much of a doubt. Now we have the Senate seat in Oregon. This one could potentially get interesting depending on who the Democrats end up nominating. Not in Oregon, in Ohio. Ohio, this is going to be Republican incumbent John Husted, who was appointed to fill the remainder of the term of Republican Vice President J.D. Vance. 2 Democrats are currently running against him, but all eyes are on former U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown and former U.S. Representative Tim Ryan in the hopes for Democrats at making this race more competitive. 2024, we did see Moreno narrowly defeat Brown 3.6% in a very close race. 2022, J.D. Vance defeated Tim Ryan by 6.1%. My thought process for this one here is John Husted does, I think, perform better electorally than potentially Vance and potentially Moreno, but the question will be who they face off against the Democrats. In the current situation, I have the Senate seat going likely Republican. If Sherrod Brown runs against John Husted, I'll have it starting as lean Republican, out of respect to Sherrod Brown being a longtime Democratic senator and strong Democrat performer in Ohio. If it ends up being John Husted versus Tim Ryan, I have it starting still in likely Republican. So for now, I'm going to have it as likely Republican. In the state of Michigan, this is Democratic incumbent Senator Gary Peters, who is retiring, so there'll be an open race. The Republican primary has Mike Rogers, the Republican nominee for Senate in 2024, running again. 4 Democrats, Abdul Al-Sayed, Mallory McMorrow, Haley Stevens, and Joe Tate, are all running. Both primaries could potentially be wide open, as Republican U.S. Representative Bill Huizenga is weighing entering this race. In 2024, the closest Senate race, or one of the closest Senate races in the country after Pennsylvania, Michigan elected Democrat Lisa Slotkin by 0.34% in a very, very close win for the Democrats. Back in 2020, the last Senate race before that, Gary Peters, the Democrat, won against the Republican John James by 1.7%. The main question here is going to be how Republicans do in Michigan without Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, helping them get a lot of voters out to vote. So for that reason, I'm going to start Michigan off as lean Democratic, but there is certainly potential for Republicans to win this state if they can get voter turnout high, but it's going to be tough without President Trump leading the ticket for them. Now we have the state of Delaware. This is going to be Democratic incumbent Senator Chris Coons, who's not yet made his intentions known, but in 2024, we did see a Senate race go for 17 points in Delaware, and then Coons won in 2020 by 21.5. Delaware fully expect to be a safe Democratic win. Again, New Jersey, this is going to be Democratic Senator Cory Booker. I do believe he is running for re-election. Yes, he is. He's not facing any Democratic or Republican opponents at this time yet. He won in 2020 by 16.3%. 2024, the Democrat Andy Kim won an open race by 9.6%. Cory Booker, I think, is a more strong electoral juggernaut than Andy Kim is at this time. New Jersey, I think, will continue to be a safe Democratic state at the Senate level. 4 remaining Senate seats left, starting with the state of Rhode Island. Rhode Island, this is going to be Democratic incumbent Jack Reed. He is running again. He is facing a Democratic primary challenger, but Jack Reed, or the Senate race in 2024, won to Sheldon Whitehouse by 20 points. Jack Reed in 2020 won by 33 points. Rhode Island will be safe Democratic once again. Massachusetts is going to be Democratic incumbent Senator Ed Markey. He is running for re-election. He does have a Democratic primary challenger, but again, right now, no major Democrats or Republicans running against him. Massachusetts in 2020 voted for Markey by 33 points. 2024, Elizabeth Warren won re-election by 19.8%. fully expect Massachusetts will be safe Democratic once again. And now we have 2 remaining Senate seats in New England, New Hampshire, and Maine, 2 of which I do expect to be very competitive in both instances. Starting with the state of New Hampshire, Democratic incumbent Senator Jeanne Shaheen is retiring. Right now, U.S. Representative Chris Pappas is looking like to be the Democratic nominee. Former Republican Senator from Massachusetts, Scott Brown, is looking to be the Republican nominee. And I think this race is going to get slept on a lot. I think this is going to be very competitive, in large part due to the fact that, yes, it was a Republican wave year, but after moving up to New Hampshire, Shaheen versus Scott Brown was a very close race. And I think Democrats that are writing off Scott Brown, saying it won't be competitive, I kind of think are making a mistake in doing that at their own peril. But in 2022, Maggie Hassan won against Don Bolduc by 9.1%. 2020, Shaheen won by 15.6%. 2016, Hassan won against Ayotte by 0.14%. I would go so far as saying I think Scott Brown is more likely to get a Kelly Ayotte percent of the vote than to get a Don Bolduc percent of the vote in 2022, getting only 44.3%. However, it is worth noting I do have the Democrats starting out favored in this race, but I only have it as lean Democrat at this time because I do think Scott Brown is going to surprise a lot of people and perform relatively strongly come the general election. And lastly, we have the state of Maine. This is Republican incumbent Susan Collins, who has not officially made her intent known, but all expectations are that she will be running again. Democrats are scrambling to find a nominee to challenge her. They have not had a notable Democrat step up yet. The current governor of Maine, Janet Mills, is the top Democrat Democrats are watching at this time. She could potentially make this race more competitive than some of the other Democrats in this race. Maine's an interesting state because in 2024, Angus King, an independent who caucuses with the Democrats, won by a safe Democratic margin, but Susan Collins won by 8.6% in 2020. 2018, King won by 19 points, and then 2014, back then, Collins won by 37. So I fully expect this race is going to be close, but I do think Susan Collins starts out as a narrow favorite, winning the race in a lean Republican margin. So right now, I have the Republicans winning 53 Senate seats, Democrats 47, and currently holding the same composition of the U.S. Senate that is happening right now. I have them holding that same margin for 2026 with some very close calls in Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, New Hampshire, and Maine. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment below, tell me your thoughts, and I hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today I'm doing my updated governor's prediction for the 2026 U.S. elections. There are 36 governor seats that are up. I'm going to go through every single one of them and give my up-to-date prediction for the month of July. I'm going to start on the West Coast here with the state of Oregon and then work my way across the country. So the state of Oregon, this is going to be Democratic incumbent Governor Tina Kotek. She's eligible to run for re-election. It's not yet stated if she will, but there is the potential of that happening. On the Republican side, the only Republican mentioned is former UFC fighter Chael Sonnen is listed as a potential candidate who's expressed interest in running. Other than that, there's not really too much information to go off of for this race. Oregon in 2022 did vote for Tina Kotek by only 3.4%, but there was a lot of vote splitting in that race, an independent getting 8.62%. Back in 2018, this governor's race went for the Democrat Brown at the time, who was also not too popular in the polls come election day, by about 6.4%. As for Oregon, I think this race starts out in the likely Democratic category to start for this election. As for California, this is going to be interesting depending on what former Vice President Kamala Harris does. Democrat Governor Gavin Newsom is term limited and cannot seek a third term. Several Democrats are potentially running, including, as I mentioned, the former Vice President. All indications have been in early polling. If she does run, she would clear the field in that regard. Lots of Republicans are running in this race as well. In 2018, California, Newsom won by 23.9%. 2022, Newsom won by 18.4%. Especially if Harris is leading the ticket, I fully expect California will be a safe Democratic win come November of 2026. Now we'll go to the state of Hawaii. This is going to be Democratic incumbent Josh Green, who was elected in 2022 for the first time. Has not yet stated if he'll run again or other potential opponents in this race, but he won by a 26-point margin in 2022, and he'll likely win by a safe Democratic margin again in 2026. The state of Alaska has the potential to maybe be actually relatively pretty competitive, as Republican Governor Mike Dunleavy is term limited and cannot run again. For the Republicans, Matsunuka Sunita Borough Mayor Edna Devaris has launched a campaign. Lieutenant Governor Nancy Dahlstrom is also mentioned, as filed paperwork to run for governor, but U.S. Representative Mary Peltola has also expressed interest in potentially running for this seat. So this could be something very interesting to watch for as well. What Peltola decides to do in terms of running for House or governor could massively shake this race up. In 2022, Dunleavy won by 26 points. Back in 2018, Dunleavy won by 7 points. The way I see this race at this time is if Peltola does decide to run, I think this race starts out as likely Republican with the potential to even go down to lean Republican. If she does not, I think the race starts out as safe Republican. I'm going to start it in likely Republican for right now because I do believe Peltola is leaning towards running for governor, but we'll have to wait and see how that all goes. Now we're going to have the state of Idaho. Idaho, this is going to be in all likelihood a safe Republican win, as Governor Brad Little, a Republican who was elected or reelected in 2022, does not have term limits and can run again. He's not yet stated if he will, but Idaho in 2022 voted by 40 points for Little. It's going to be safe Republican once again. The state of Nevada, which ended up being one of the closest governor's races in the country in 2022, Nevada, this is a Republican incumbent, Joe Lombardo. He was elected in a very narrow margin, defeating Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak. This time around, the state attorney general, Aaron Ford, is officially running in this race. Sisolak, the former governor, also has expressed interest in potentially running in this race again for his old job. Back in 2022, it was a very narrow one for Lombardo, 1.5%, defeating Sisolak in a close race. 2018, Sisolak won a close election against Republican Adam Laxalt by about 4.1%. This time around, I think we do see Nevada start out as very competitive as well, but I think Lombardo will win by a lean Republican margin at this time. Arizona is what is expected to be the closest governor's race in the country in 2026. Democrat Katie Hobbs, who was elected in 2022 very narrowly over the Republican Carrie Lake by 50.3%, is running for governor again. She'll likely be facing off against U.S. Representative Andy Biggs or Karen Taylor Robson, both of which have been endorsed by President Trump. Arizona's had a lot of close elections recently. 2022, Hobbs and Lake was only a 0.67% win for Hobbs over Lake, very, very close. After 2018, the Republican governor, Doug Ducey, won by 14.2%. I fully expect Arizona is going to be one of the closest races. In my last prediction, I did have this race going for Andy Biggs over Katie Hobbs in the tilt Republican margin. Some recent polling has come out, though, showing Katie Hobbs does have a higher floor support and higher approval numbers than she has in past months. For now, I am making a little bit of a change here and making Arizona a tilt Democrat for Katie Hobbs at this time. I do certainly think that Andy Biggs can win this race come November of 26, but I think Katie Hobbs at this point in time does have a narrow advantage in winning this race. Now the state of Wyoming. Wyoming, this is going to be Republican incumbent Governor Mark Gordon, who was reelected in 2022. State law limits the governor to 2 consecutive terms, but Gordon has not yet ruled out challenging the law's constitutionality and seeking a third term. But regardless, this is one of the most Republican states in the country, 58.3% win. In 2022, Wyoming will be a safe Republican win. The state of Colorado. Colorado, I do believe, does have an open governor's race this time around, as the Democrat Jared Polis cannot seek a third consecutive term. However, U.S. Senator Michael Bennet is running for this governor's race, as well as the state attorney general Phil Weiser. One of them will be the Republican nominee. Colorado, at the governor level, it was safe Democrat back in 2022. In 2018, Polis won by 10.6%, a likely Democratic margin. I think this time around, we probably see a margin of victory relatively similar to 2022. I don't think it's going to be too competitive. I think Colorado will start out in the safe Democratic category. Now we have the state of New Mexico. New Mexico, this is going to be Democrat Michelle Lujan Grisham. She is term limited by the state constitution and cannot seek a third term. Several potential candidates are running in this race, including U.S. Representative and U.S. Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland. Also, Sam Bregman and Ken Miyagishimi are also potential candidates. Javi Morales, the incumbent lieutenant governor, has also expressed interest in running. So the Democratic primary is wide open. Republican primary is also pretty wide open. Rio Rancho Mayor Greg Hull is running in this race. 2022, the state went for Grisham by 6.4%. 2018, it went for Grisham by 14.4%. Regardless, I think we see a decently competitive election in New Mexico. I do think the Democrats are favored, though, starting the race out as likely Democrat. Now moving to South Dakota. South Dakota, this is Governor Larry Roden, who took office upon the resignation of Kristi Noem to become Secretary of Homeland Security. Roden has not yet announced whether he'll seek a full term as governor, but has expressed interest in doing so. The Speaker of the South Dakota House of Representatives, John Hanson, has launched a campaign for the Republican nomination. U.S. Representative Dusty Johnson has also expressed interest in a campaign, as has Attorney General Marty Jackley. So we may have a very competitive Republican primary underway, but it was still a safe Republican win for Kristi Noem back in 2022. I think we see South Dakota go safe Republican once again. Now we have the state of Nebraska. Nebraska, which is Republican Governor Jim Pillen. He is running for a second term. The only potential candidate that could make this race close is independent Dan Osborne, who ran for Senate in 2024. If he were to enter this race, the potential of this race being more competitive is certainly there. Pillen won by 23 points back in 2022, and Ricketts won by 18 points in 2018. But Osborne did lose his Senate race by only about 7 points in 2024, and much closer than expected. I have this race starting out as safe Republican for now, but if Dan Osborne does jump in, I would move it to likely Republican, but I think for right now, it starts out as safe Republican. Next, we go to the state of Kansas. Kansas Governor Laura Kelly, a Democrat, is term limited and cannot seek a third consecutive term. She won 2 very close, impressive victories in 2018 and 2022. This time around, Cindy Hochler, a state senator, is running for the Democratic nomination. Lieutenant Governor David Tolland and former Kansas Secretary of Transportation Julie Lorentz are also potential Democratic candidates. Former Governor of Kansas Jeff Collier, a Republican, Kansas Secretary of State Scott Schwab, and Johnson County Commissioner Charlotte O'Hara have all announced their candidacies, as well as several other Republicans being potential candidates like Ty Masterson, Dayton Moore, Vicki Schmidt, Chris Kobach, and several other Republicans could potentially run. This race is going to be very fascinating, as in 2022, as I mentioned, Kelly won by 2.2% for the Democrats. 2018, Kelly won by 5 points. Before that, 2014, the Republican Governor Sam Brownback, who was very unpopular at the time, won by 3.7%. In 2020, Brownback won by 31%. So this would be breaking a little bit of recent electoral precedent, having the Democrat lose, but I do expect Kansas will go Republican, but I think it goes under safe Republican 15% margin. I think it starts out as likely Republican at this time and would be the first Republican flip of the night. Oklahoma, this is going to be Republican incumbent Governor Kevin Stitt, who is term limited and cannot run to a third term. Lots of Republicans are running in this race, including the Attorney General Getner Drummond and Secretary of Budget Mike Massey. Representative Charles McHale, State Senator Jake Merrick are all potential Republican candidates, as well as other potential Republicans as well. The state in 2022 voted for Stitt by 13.7%. 2018, Stitt won by 12.1%. It is possible it goes likely Republican once again, but I think this time around, Oklahoma will go by a safe Republican margin. Texas is going to be Republican Governor Greg Abbott. Texas does not have constitutional term limits, so he is eligible to run for a 4th term. And on March 1st, Abbott announced that he will be doing that. The only Democrats that are mentioned right now are Dave Clark, a former Amazon executive and former CEO, and James Tallarico, state representative, who's also weighing a run for Senate. This is going to be very interesting because Greg Abbott won by 10.9% in 2022, and 2018, Abbott won by 13.3%. However, if Ken Paxton becomes the Republican nominee for Senate, it's possible if he does poorly, he may drag down other Republicans on the ticket, like Greg Abbott, maybe making this race more competitive. Right now, though, I think Greg Abbott starts out as the favorite, putting the race in likely Republican. Now we're going to go to the state of Arkansas. This is going to be Republican incumbent Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who was first elected back in 2022. Democrat State Senator Frederick Love has announced a campaign on the Democratic side, but this race will not be close. Sanders won by 27.8% in 2022. Fully expect that she will be winning this race in 2026 by a safe Republican margin. Now we move to the state of Iowa. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, a Republican, is term limited, or not term limited. She could seek a 3rd term, but has decided not to. This race is wide open on the Republican side, with candidates including Eddie Andrews, Randy Feenstra as a potential candidate, Brad Sherman's a potential candidate, State Senator Mike Boozelot's a potential candidate, Pat Grassley, Brenna Byrd. Lots of potential Republicans could run. On the Democratic side, State Auditor Rob Sand declared his candidacy. Sand is the only Democratic statewide office holder in Iowa that is in the state, and he is running for this race. So the Democrats have landed a top-tier candidate for them in 2026. Iowa in 2022 was a safe Republican win in 2022, but in 2018, Iowa was only a lean Republican win against Kim Reynolds. The competitiveness of this race is really all over the place. It could be safe Republican, could be likely, could be lean. It depends on how well Rob Sand is able to do. Right now, I'm starting this race off as lean Republican very barely. I'm having about a 4.5 point win for the Republican at this time, but I could see this race moving up to likely Republican as well. But I do think Rob Sand is going to make this race pretty competitive, and that's why I'm starting it out as lean Republican. Now we're going to move to Minnesota. Minnesota, this is Governor Tim Walz, who was the vice president for Kamala Harris for the Democratic ticket in 2024. He is running for re-election, I do believe, in this race. So on the Republican side of things, there are some Republicans, Jeff Johnson, Kendall Quayles, and other potential Republicans that could run, including Michael Lindell's name is also mentioned. Back in 22, Tim Walz won by 7.7%. 2018, Walz won by 11.4%. I do believe this time around, Tim Walz will win by a likely Democratic margin once again. 18 governor seats to go. Republicans have 11. Democrats have 7. We're going to go back down south again and work our way up, starting with the state of Alabama. Alabama Republican Kay Ivey is term limited and cannot run for re-election, but U.S. Senator Tommy Tuberville is running for this race to be the next governor of Alabama, and he likely will be that, as Kay Ivey won by 37.5% back in 2024. Alabama is going to go safe Republican for governor. The state of Tennessee. Tennessee is also going to be a all likelihood state that goes for the Republicans. Governor Bill Lee is term limited and cannot seek a third term. There is speculation U.S. Senator Marshall Blackburn may be running for this race. Tennessee went Republican in 2022 by 32 points and will do so by a safe Republican margin once again in 2026. The state of Illinois. Illinois, this is going to be Democratic incumbent Governor J.B. Pritzker. He is running again for re-election. He just announced that a few days ago. On the Republican side, Sheriff James Mendrick has announced his candidacy, as well as other potential Republicans that could be running. Illinois was likely Democrat in 2022, 12.5%. 2018, safe Democrat Pritzker by 15.7% against then Republican Governor Bruce Rauner. Right now, I think Illinois starts out in the likely Democratic category just by a small margin. I think it's in between 13.5% and 14.5% right now for Pritzker in that state. Now we're going to go to the state of Florida. Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, who has served 2 terms in the state, is term limited and cannot take a third term. Right now, U.S. Representative Byron Donalds is running in this race and has the endorsement of President Trump. All eyes are on First Lady of Florida, Casey DeSantis. There is some speculation she may try and run for governor to succeed her husband as governor. If she does, that Republican primary could get very competitive. Otherwise, other Republicans include Matt Gaetz, Jeanette Nunez, Wilton Simpson, and Miami Mayor Francis Suarez as potential Republican candidates. On the Democratic side, former Republican, now Democrat David Jolly is running for this race. Other Democratic potential candidates include State Senator Chevron Jones and State House Minority Leader Fentress Driscoll. Jason Pizzo, former State Senate Minority Leader, is running as an independent in this race. This race, which voted for Ron DeSantis by about 19.4% in 2022 after a very narrow win in 2018 of 0.39%, Florida has shifted to become a very reliable Republican state now, and I think Byron Donalds starts out in the safe Republican column to win. Though it is possible, with vote splitting among Democrats and independents, maybe the margin could fall under 15%. I think Florida starts out as safe Republican right now. Georgia, which is expected to be one of the closest races in all of the United States, Governor Brian Kemp, who was reelected in 2022, cannot run for a third consecutive term. Attorney General Chris Carr has announced his bid. He's seen as the likely Republican nominee right now. The Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones has expressed interest in running, as well as Tyler Harper, former U.S. Senator Kelly Loeffler, and Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger could all be potential candidates. On the Democratic side, Jason Estevez, former mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, and State Representative Derek Jackson have all announced campaigns. All eyes are also on the former Democratic nominee for governor, Stacey Abrams, for 2018 and 2022. This race is going to be very close after a likely Republican win in 2022 for Kemp and a lean Republican win for Kemp in 2018 against Stacey Abrams in a very close election matchup. It's also worth noting this is on the same ballot as a very close competitive Senate race with Jon Ossoff, so that race may have some impact on down ballot effects on this race as well. Right now, I have Georgia starting out in the lean Republican category for Chris Carr, but again, this is one that certainly has the potential to go either way as well. South Carolina, this is going to be Republican incumbent Governor Henry McMaster, who is term limited and cannot seek a third term. Republican State Senator Josh Kimbrell is running in this race. Also, Attorney General of the state of South Carolina, Alan Wilson, just recently announced his candidacy a few days ago. He's running in this race. U.S. Representative Nancy Mace is also expected to potentially be joining this race as well. As for South Carolina, though, it voted for McMaster by a safe margin in 2022 after a likely margin in 2018. I think we see something more like 2022, where the state goes safe Republican when everything is said and done. In the state of Ohio, Republican Governor Mike DeWine is term limited and cannot seek a third term. Right now, Vivek Ramaswamy, the 2024 presidential candidate, is running in this race and is viewed as a likely Republican nominee as Attorney General Dave Yost announced his candidacy for governor in January, but then withdrew in May of 2025. On the Democratic side of things, Dr. Amy Acton is running as a Democrat. Former U.S. Representative Tim Ryan has expressed interest, and former U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown is another potential candidate. This race, I think, depends on who the Democrats end up nominating, but it still will be probably pretty close either way. DeWine won by 25 points in 2018, only a lean Republican win for DeWine in 2022. I think for right now, the way this race starts out is Amy Acton versus Vivek Ramaswamy, I think, starts out as likely Republican, as does Tim Ryan versus Vivek, whereas Vivek versus Sherrod Brown, I think, starts out as lean Republican. I'm starting the race out as lean, or as likely Republican for right now, but certainly it's a very close one to watch. Now in the state of Wisconsin, this is going to be Democratic Governor Tony Evers. He's up for re-election. He's not yet stated if he will run for a third term, but it is possible that he could. Other Democrats that could run include David Crowley, State Attorney General Josh Kaul, Sarah Godleski, Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson, Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez. Other Democrats are all waiting to see what Evers decides to do. On the Republican side of things, Washington County Executive Joe Showman has announced a campaign. State Senator Patrick Testin is also expressed interest in running, and U.S. Representative Tom Tiffany has also expressed interest. Eric Hovde, the 2024 Republican nominee for Senate, Rebecca Kleefisch, candidate for governor in 2022, and Will Martin are also mentioned as potential candidates. 2022, Tony Evers won re-election by 3.4% against Tim Michels, and in 2018, Evers defeated Republican Governor Scott Walker by 1.1%, a lean Democratic margin, in a very close race. I expect Wisconsin will be close once again. Right now, if Evers runs for re-election, I have the race starting out as lean Democrat. If Evers decides to not run for re-election, I do have the race starting as tilt Democrat, but I do think the Democrats do hold a very narrow advantage to start out in this state, in this election cycle. Now we have the state of Michigan, where there's a very interesting situation happening here. Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer is term limited and cannot seek a third term. Democratic side of things, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson is running for this race, as well as Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist and Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson. On the Republican side of things, former Attorney General Mike Cox is running, as well as Senate Minority Leader Eric Nesbitt, but U.S. Congressman John James, the 10th District, running is the main candidate for the Republicans to win at this time. However, Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, a former Democrat, announces his candidacy to be an independent candidate in 2024. The early polling has shown Duggan getting a very significant amount of the vote, around 15 to 20%, and that can play a very big impact on which party ends up winning in November. Now, for recent election history, in 2018, Whitmer won by a likely Democratic margin. 2022, she also won by a likely Democratic margin. But after we've seen some close races for president and Senate in the state of Michigan, in this three-way race, it's really anyone's guess for who's going to win at this time. I do have the Democrats narrowly favored to win, as without Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, I'm skeptical if Republican turnout will be as high as it was in 2024. But I have Michigan going for the Democrats by under 1%, again, in a very close election due to the fact that there will be a lot of vote splitting from Mayor Mike Duggan. This puts Democrats at 10, Republicans 17. Now we have the state of Maryland with Democratic Governor Wes Moore. He's eligible to run for a second term, and he will be doing so. Though businessman Ed Hale is challenging Moore in the Democratic primary, I don't think Moore is really in much danger of losing that. On the Republican side, State Delegate Christopher Eric Bouchat and John Myrick, a candidate in 2024, have announced their candidacies. Former Governor Larry Hogan is seen as a potential Republican candidate, though there's been no indication if he will be running. Wes Moore won by a safe margin in 2022 after 2018 when Larry Hogan won by a likely Republican margin. Hogan is really the only Republican in Maryland that has a chance at making this race competitive. Otherwise, Wes Moore will win by a safe Democratic margin. Now the state of Pennsylvania, where Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro, who was elected in 2022 in a very big victory, is eligible to run again. He has not yet stated if he will, but in all likelihood he will be. Pennsylvania's Treasurer Stacey Garrity, a Republican, is seen as a potential candidate. State Senator Doug Mastriano, the nominee in 2022, is also considering running. Other Republicans include Scott Martin and U.S. Representative Dan Muser. This is going to be a tough race for the Republicans no matter what, as Shapiro won by 14.8% in 2022 against Mastriano, and in 2018, the state went safe Democrat for Democrat Tom Wolf against the Republican Wagner. So this race, or that might have been 2014, actually, now that I think about it. Yeah, that was 14, the Republican governor lost. But Pennsylvania is much more of a reliable Democratic state at the governor level than presidential and Senate level. But I do think Josh Shapiro will win by a likely Democratic margin. It may be a little bit less than 2022, but it also could be around a similar margin. But Democrats should have no problems holding that race. Now the state of New York, where New York could be getting very, very interesting here. Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul is eligible to run for a second term, and she will be doing so, though she is facing a primary challenge from her lieutenant governor, Antonio Delgado. So that has the potential to shake things out very interesting. Hochul's approval numbers have not been all that strong in recent months. It's also worth noting U.S. Representative Mike Lawler, a Republican, is seen as a potential Republican challenger, and we've gotten news just a few days ago that U.S. Representative Elise Stefanik will be running for this race as well. I think given Hochul's approval numbers and everything involved with that, this race is going to get very competitive. And after 2022, Hochul won by 6.4% against Republican Lee Zeldin. I think we actually see a pretty competitive race here. I'm starting this race out as lean Democrat at this time. It may end up being likely Democrat come November of 2026, but I think Kathy Hochul versus Elise Stefanik or Mike Lawler has the potential to be really competitive and could have an impact on House races and such down ballot in the state of New York. Now we're going to go to the state of Connecticut. The Connecticut governor election, this is Democratic Governor Ned Lamont. He was reelected in 2022. Connecticut does not have term limits in its constitution. He is eligible to take a third term. He is not yet confirmed if he will. Former Hartford Mayor Luke Bronin, Lieutenant Governor Susan Byskiewicz are also expressing interest in running if Lamont chooses not to. On the Republican side of things, Jennifer Tucker has announced her candidacy. New Britain Mayor Eric Stewart has also formed an exploratory committee. Matthew Corey, a Republican nominee for Senate in 2018, 2024, has expressed running, as has State Senator Heather Sommers. Connecticut's interesting because in 2022, it voted likely Democrat for Ned Lamont over the Republican Stefanowski by 12.9%. Back in 2018, it was actually very competitive. Lamont only won against Stefanowski by 3.2%. In 2014, that was also a very close race, 2.6% as well. So despite being such a reliable Democratic state at the governor level, Connecticut seems to be a little bit more competitive. I'm going to start Connecticut out as likely Democrat right now. I'm not putting it in safe just because I do think there's potential it could be under 15 points. Now we move to the state of Rhode Island. Rhode Island, this is Democratic Governor Dan McKee, whose approval numbers are not all that popular, and it's possible he may be facing a Democratic primary challenger from Helena Folks, a former executive with CVS Pharmacy and candidate for governor in 2022, has expressed interest in running, as well as former Governor Gina Raimondo has also expressed interest in potentially running. On the Republican side of things, Ashley Collis is also considered a potential candidate. This race, I think, is really all about the Democratic primary, as it voted safe Democrat for McKee in 2022, and in 2018, it voted safe Democrat for Raimondo as well. So it depends who the Democrats end up nominating, but I think the Democrat, whoever it is, will end up winning by safe Democrat no matter what. Now we have the state of Massachusetts. This is going to be Democratic Governor Maura Healey. There are no term limits in Massachusetts. Healey is running for re-election. On the Republican side, former Massachusetts Secretary of Housing and Economic Development Mike Keneally is running, and former Chief Administrator and Acting General Manager for Mass Bay Transportation Authority Brian Shortsleeve are also running. Massachusetts has some other potential candidates that could run. It's worth noting that in past elections, Massachusetts had a lot of Republican governors in competitive elections, but in 2022, Maura Healey won by 29.2%. 2018, Charlie Baker did win by 33.5%, and then elected in 2014, Charlie Baker very narrowly by 1.9%. This time around, though, I think Massachusetts is probably going to remain a safe Democratic state. Healey will win re-election without too much of a problem in all likelihood. Now we have the state of Vermont. Vermont, which has a Republican governor right now, and Republican Governor Phil Scott, more of a moderate liberal Republican, but he is eligible to run for a sixth two-year term. He has not yet stated if he will do so. Vermont's very interesting here. Phil Scott keeps winning by large margins by 47% in 2022. 2018, he won by 14.9%. 2020, again, they do two-year terms. In Vermont, Scott won by 41.1%. 2024, he won by 51.6. It's all dependent on if he decides to run or not. If Phil Scott will run, he'll win by a safe margin. If he does not decide to run, Vermont will likely go safe Democrat. So for now, until he makes that decision, I'll leave it as safe Republican. Now we have the state of New Hampshire, where Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte was first elected in 2024. They also do 2-year election terms for governor in New Hampshire. New Hampshire, Kelly Ayotte, governor. Democrat State Senator Tom Sherman was a Democratic nominee for governor in 2022, has expressed interest in running again. Businessman John Kuiper is running in 2026 as an independent. Ayotte won in 2024 by a likely Republican margin of 9.3% against Joyce Craig. 2022, we saw Chris Sununu win by about 15.5%. 2020, we saw Sununu win by about 31 to 32%. As for 2026, I think Ayotte right now starts out as the clear favorite to win, but I do have her winning by a likely Republican margin. Lastly, we have the state of Maine. Maine, this is going to be Democratic Governor Janet Mills. She is term limited and cannot run again. Several Democrats are running in this primary, including the Secretary of State, Shanna Bellows, former State Senate President Troy Jackson, businessman Angus King III, the son of the independent U.S. Senator Angus King, former State House Speaker and former Director of the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation, Hannah Pingree, the daughter of U.S. Representative Shelley Pingree, is also running in this race. Other Democrats, Ryan Fecteau, Rachel Talbot Ross, and former Portland City Councilor Spencer Thibodeau are all potential Democratic candidates as well. On the Republican side of things are really wide open, with retired financial analyst Kenneth Capron, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Robert Charles, real estate businessman David Jones, and candidate for governor in 2002 James Libby, entrepreneur Owen McCarthy, and former Paris Selectman Robert Wessels announcing their candidacies. Healthcare executive and member of the Bush family Jonathan Bush, former mayor of Auburn Jason Levesque, and state representative Laurel Libby, state Senate minority leader and candidate for 2018 Governor Garrett Mason, motivational speaker Travis Mills, and 2018 Republican nominee for Governor Sean Moody, and U.S. Representative from the Maine District, former U.S. Representative Bruce Poliquin, are mentioned as potential candidates. So very wide open fields on both the Republican and Democratic sides for governor of Maine. In 2022, we saw Maine elect Janet Mills by 13.2%. 2018, we saw Mills win by 7.7%. 2014 was the last time it went Republican. Rapala Page won by 4.8%. How Maine starts out for 2026, I think it's more competitive than it was in that 13% margin in 2022, but I think the Democrats do start out as the favorite, as a likely Democrat. It should be worth noting that Maine has not elected the same party for governor 3 consecutive times in a row, so if Democrats do win Maine in 2026, that will be a bit of electoral history happening in the state. Right now, I have Democrats winning 17 governor's races. In 2026, I have Republicans winning 19 with some very close elections in Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Iowa, Georgia, New York, and that's pretty much it, maybe potentially Maine, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, and New Mexico as well. But I'm very interested to hear what your thoughts are. Leave a comment below telling me what you think about this map, what your map looks like for 2026 for the governor map. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in the next video. Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. So today I'll be going through the U.S. House map for the 2026 elections and going through each state and making my current predictions for the U.S. House at this time as of July 1st of 2026. So right now Democrats currently trail the Republicans for House control. Republicans have 220 House seats. Democrats have 215. So the Democrats need about 3 seats to flip back the House. The latest generic vote numbers out of the Real Clear Politics polling average shows the Democrats favored by about 2.3% in the U.S. House right now. So this is how I think the House races are going to go right now. Using the consensus ranking on the 270 to win website, it has Republicans favored in 208 House seats, Democrats 205, but I may be changing some of these rankings based on my own personal predictions. Starting with the state of Alabama, they currently have all the House seats going the way they currently are. Safe Republican, safe Democrat. I'm not going to change any of these. I think these are pretty spot on. Alaska is likely Republican. I do agree with that. Arizona has 2 toss-up races at this time. One being Arizona 1 with David Schweikert, and one being Arizona 6 with Juan Ciscomani. We did see very close elections here in these areas in 2024, with Schweikert winning by 3.8% and Ciscomani winning by 2.5%. Both of these are targets for the Democrats in 2026, but I do think the Republicans are going to hold on to some of these toss-up seats, and I do think these 2 will stay in the Republican side. It's possible if the Democrats have a very good night without Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, though, we may see them potentially flip to the Democratic side. Arkansas will all be safe Republican here. California has a handful of competitive ones. First, we're going to start with the 13th district and go more in depth. Adam Gray narrowly won here in 2024. I remember covering this race for a very long time in the following weeks after the election. Adam Gray won by 0.089% against the Republican John Duarte in a very close race. I think this time around, with Gray as the incumbent, I do think he narrowly holds on and wins this race. It's possible it goes Republican, but in a more Democratic-friendly midterm, I think it will stay in the Democratic side. Thinking more of the Democratic area with District 45, this is Derek Tran. This is another very close race in 2024. Derek Tran was able to win here against the Republican Michelle Steele by 0.21%. Again, another very close race. I think in a more Democratic-friendly midterm, I think this race does start out as lean Democrat, but still very, very close. That's going to be it for the for the toss-up races listed in California. It's possible California 41 with Ken Calvert and California 40 with Young Kim could potentially be very competitive and flip to the Democrats as well, but I am going to leave them as lean Republican at this time. In the state of Colorado, right now, all the races, we know pretty much how they're going to go, except for the 8th district with Gabe Evans, which had a very close race in 2024. It voted for Gabe Evans by 0.73% against the Democrat Caraveo. In 2022, it was a very close race. Caraveo won with 48.36%. And 2020, the map was redrawn from there. The question will be, can Gabe Evans get around 49% of the vote again in a more Democratic-friendly midterm environment? This is one where I actually think the Republicans are going to hold on, because I think it likely would have flipped a lot earlier in 2022 if it wasn't for the third-party vote. I think Gabe Evans, as the incumbent, will narrowly hold on to this district. In the state of Connecticut, all the districts are pretty much safe, except for the 5th district, which is listed as likely Democrat. I think that will all remain the way it is. Delaware, only one congressional district. Sarah McBride currently holds it, and I think that will remain safe Democrat for 2026. The state of Florida, all the districts are pretty much safe except for a handful, with Anna Paulina Luna in Florida 13, I think will stay Republican. Darren Soto will remain likely Democrat. Jared Moskowitz is up for a close election in Florida 23. He did win a very close election in 2024 in the state of Florida, only winning by about 4.9%, but I do think he'll hold on by a likely Democratic margin for 2026, or lean Democratic margin for 2026. Georgia, again, unless any of these maps get redrawn, not really any competitive seats up in Georgia for 26. Hawaii, 2 House seats, both of which are going to be safe Democrat. Idaho, sorry, I meant to click Idaho here. Idaho, again, 2 House seats, both going to be safe Republican. Illinois, only competitive district really is Illinois 17th, and I think Democrats hold on there. Too much of an issue. Indiana, the only competitive seat is Indiana 1 with Frank Mervan. Frank Mervan won this seat in Indiana in 2024 by 8.5%, after it went likely Democrat in Indiana 1 by 5.7% in 2022. I think that one stays as lean Democrat, or I'd even put it maybe in likely Democrat for right now. Iowa, this one's going to be very, very interesting. There are 2 House races I'm watching very closely, in Iowa 1 with Marinette Miller Meeks, and Iowa 3 with Republican Zach Nunn. In 2024, we saw these House races be very close. Marinette Miller Meeks only won by 0.19% against Democrat Christina Bohannon. Bohannon is running again, and she is going to be in all likelihood the Democratic nominee. And in Iowa 3, where Republican Zach Nunn won by 3.8% against a Democrat in that election. In 2022, Iowa 1 was a 6.8% win, where Zach Nunn only won by 0.69% against the former Democrat Sidney Axteny. In 2020, before the map was redrawn, both of these districts were very, very close, Axteny winning by 1.4%, and Iowa 3, Miller Meeks 0.0015 in 2020. So these 2 are going to be very close. For right now, I do have Iowa 1 flipping to the Democrats. Iowa 3 I am going to narrowly leave in the Republican categories. I don't believe Sidney Axteny said that she's running in this district again, but it's possible. With maybe more closer than expected governor and Senate races going on in Iowa in 2026, Iowa 3 could potentially flip as well. I'm going to leave it as lean Republican for right now, though. Kansas, all the House races are going to go the way that they are as of now. Kentucky, same thing. I don't think any of them are going to shift. It will be interesting to see the Republican primary for Thomas Massie, but for the general election, I think they'll all remain the way they are. Louisiana, again, same thing. I think Louisiana or Texas, one of these states, I think it was Texas, was looking at trying to redraw their congressional map, but Louisiana will stay the way it is. Maine's going to be very close because the first district will be safe Democrat, but the second district with Jared Golden is going to be very close. Former Republican Governor Paul LePage is running against Golden. Every race involving Jared Golden has been very, very close. In 2024, Golden only won against Republican Austin Thurl by 0.55%. In 2022, Golden won by 6.1%. 2020, 6.1. 2018 was 1 point. I think Paul LePage, the early polling so far, shows him performing very well here. I actually think Jared Golden will lose this time around a very narrow election against Paul LePage, enough to flip the seat to the Republican side in a very close race. Golden has been in close races before, and he's been able to pull it off, but I think this time around against the former governor, LePage does end up flipping the seat. As for the state of Maryland, I think all the races will stay the way that they are. Massachusetts, again, same thing, all pretty much safe Democratic races. The state of Michigan, there are two very competitive House seats that are up. One in Michigan 10 with Republican John James, one in Michigan 7 with Republican Tom Barrett. And these are going to be very, very interesting. Michigan 10 will do first with John James, voted for James by 6.1% in 2024 after James only won it by 0.49 in 2022. In 2020, it was split up and drawn differently. Without John James at the top of the Republican ticket, it'll be very interesting to see how this one does end up going. The Cook Political Voting Index for this district is listed at Republican +3, so it does have a slight Republican lean, but nothing really too significant in this race. So Michigan 10 is going to be very close. I'm skeptical about this one. This one I'm really unsure of how it's going to go in this midterm election environment with Democrats are supposed to be doing better. I am going to narrowly give it to the Republicans, but I really think that one could potentially go to the Democrats. We're Michigan 7 with Tom Barrett. This one was also very close in 2024. Tom Barrett won by 3.7%. In 2022, the Democrat, Elisa Slotkin, won by 5.4%. Now it's going to be a competitive race for 2026. How this one goes, I think it's going to be very close. I think Tom Barrett certainly could win this one, but I actually think the Democrats may be poised to flip one of these Michigan's House seats, and I think Michigan 7 is the one that I have flipping at this time. Minnesota, all the House seats I expect to go the way that they are. We have Mississippi. Again, I think they'll all remain. Missouri, they're all going to remain the way that they are. Not too much to change there. Montana, Montana 1 could be more competitive maybe, but I think it will remain the way it is. Nebraska, this one's very interesting. Don Bacon, the Republican incumbent, just got news about 5 minutes ago before I started recording this video that Don Bacon is planning to retire for 2026. That will have huge ramifications on this race. If Don Bacon stayed in, it would have been very close. There's a possibility he could have won, but without Don Bacon in the race, I think at very least this race starts out as lean Democrat. After a few presidential elections now of the Democrats winning this district, I think we see the Democrats finally win this district with Don Bacon retiring. Nevada, I think the 4 House races here will remain the way they are. Nevada 3 with Susie Lee could potentially be competitive, but I don't think it's the right election environment for Democrats or for Republicans to be able to win this seat back. The state of New Hampshire, again, I think New Hampshire's one maybe more competitive without Chris Pappas running, but I think both will stay in the Democratic category. New Jersey, 2 competitive races in New Jersey 7 with Tom Keene, in New Jersey 9 with Nellie Pooh. I do think looking at recent election history, Tom Keene did win the state or the district in New Jersey by 5.4% in 2024 after winning it by 2.8% in 2022 in narrow margins. New Jersey 9, Pooh won by 4.9% in 2024 after Parcell won it by 11.4%. My prediction of this race, I do think Tom Keene won by a large enough margin last time around to hold on and win this district by a lean Republican margin in 2026, but it will be certainly very close. In this district, I'm going to leave in the Democratic side. New Mexico, we see right now that New Mexico 2 with Gabriel Vasquez was a Democratic win in 2024. Let's pull up the results on that one. It voted for Vasquez by 4.2% against Yvette Harrell, 4.2%, whereas it was only 0.7% win in 2022 in that race. Expecting the 2026 election environment to be more favorable to the Democrats than 2022 was, I do think the Democrats hold on to New Mexico 2 in this scenario. New York's going to be very interesting here. There are a lot of competitive races to watch for, including the 19th with Josh Riley, 17th with Michael Lawler, And right here, New York 4 with Laura Gillen. Gillen did win, I believe, this race in 2024, flipping it from red to blue against Republican Anthony D'Esposito by 2.3%. Again, I'm expecting a more Democratic environment than 2024 and 2022 and 2026, so I think this race will end up staying in the Democratic hands. But if the governor's race ends up being close between Kathy Hochul and Elise Stefanik, or Kathy Hochul and Mike Lawler, there's the potential for the Republicans to do better down ballot. Though without Mike Lawler running in this district, if he does become the Republican nominee for governor, it's possible this district might flip to the Democrats as well. But for now, I'm going to leave that as lean Republican and give the Democrats that district right here in New York 4. North Carolina, one competitive district that's up in North Carolina 1. This is Democrat Don Davis. Don Davis, I believe, did win this district in 2024 by 1.7%, so very narrowly won that. 2022, it was redrawn. It was a 4.7% victory here. Republicans are undoubtedly going to be targeting this district in 2024 or in 2026, but I think Davis will hold on. I think he'll hold on and narrowly win this district. North Dakota, its only district, will go red. Ohio, two very, very close districts to watch for in 2026. Ohio might be redrawing their congressional map as well. If they do that, these three districts in Ohio 1, Ohio 9, and Ohio 13 may all be flipping to the Republican side. If the Republicans were able to do that, obviously Democrats are going to have a say about that, but that could potentially be happening. These races in Ohio, Ohio 9 barely stayed Democrat in 2024. Ohio 13 went Democrat by 2.2%. Ohio 1 went 9.2%. This time around, it is a more Democratic-friendly environment, but I do think Ohio 13 narrowly stays blue, but I actually do think Marcy Kaptur in Ohio 9 will lose, and it will narrowly flip to the Republican side. Again, if this map is redistricted, I do think all three of these do end up flipping to the Republican side, but for right now, I do think 13 and 1 in their current composition stay the way they are, with Marcy Kaptur narrowly losing Ohio 9 against Derek Marin, who is running again in 2026. I do think that narrowly flips to the Republican side. Oklahoma, I think, remains the way it is. Oregon, I think, also remains the way it is. Janelle Bynum's district, the fifth one, will be competitive. I think it will remain Democratic. Pennsylvania, we have a handful of competitive districts to watch for here. Starting with the 7th district, I'll go through. This 7th district right here voted for Ryan McKenzie, the Republican, by 1 point against Susie Wild in 2024 after Wild won it by 2 points in 2022. We also see Republican Scott Perry winning by 1.3% in 2024. After 2022, it went for Perry by 7.7%. This one's going to be very interesting to watch because now Donald Trump will not be at the top of the ticket to help drive out Republican votes, but Democrat Governor Josh Shapiro will be, and I'm expecting him to win by a very large margin. So I actually think PA 7 with Ryan McKenzie will narrowly go for the Democrats, and PA 10 with Scott Perry, who's won narrow election after narrow election, I think will very narrowly end up losing this seat, flipping to the Democrats. Rob Bresnahan in PA 8, they currently have it listed as lean Republican. Bresnahan won by 1.6% in 2024 against Cartwright after Cartwright won by 2.4% in 2022. I actually think there's a possibility the Democrats do end up winning this one as well, flipping it back to the Democratic side, wiping out the Republican gains that they made in 2024. And again, I think a large reason being that Republicans will not have Donald Trump at the top of the ticket to help drive out turnout the way they did in 2024. Now we're going to go to the state of Rhode Island. Both of these states or districts will expect to be blue. South Carolina, again, they're all going to remain the way that they are. South Dakota will remain the same. Tennessee will remain the same. Texas has a few competitive races here. Texas 28 for Henry Cuellar. That one could be competitive. I think will stay blue. The only one I'm really watching closely here is Texas 34, Vicente Gonzalez. This district in 2024 voted for Gonzalez by 2.6% against Mayra Flores, the Republican, after it voted by 8.5% for Gonzalez in 2022 and 13.6% in 2020. I think this race will be very close, but remain in Democratic hands. Utah as well will remain the way it is. Vermont, same thing, only one representative, and it will go safe Democratic. Virginia has a few close races up, including Virginia 7 with Eugene Vindman. That one could be competitive. And Virginia 2 with Jen Kiggins. I've seen this one a lot as a potential flip, as one of the first flips given to the Democrats. I think Kiggins winning by 3.8% in 2024, after winning by 3.4 and 2.2, or in 2022, And I actually think that Kiggins is actually going to hold on here. I think she's going to win re-election in this district. It might be by a smaller margin, but I think she's going to do well enough in this district to hold on and win. So Virginia stays the way it is there. The state of Washington, the 3rd district, with Mary Perez. This district, let's see the results from 2024. Perez, losing camp, Perez won by 3.9% against the Republican Joe Kent. 2022, it nearly went for Perez by 0.82%. In 2020, it was Butler by 13. It depends who the Republicans end up nominating, because this one could be very close. If it's Joe Kent again, it's probably going to go Democratic. If it's not Joe Kent, this race is going to be very close. Perez is getting a Democratic primary challenger as well. That should be worth noting. But I do think this race is going to end up going very narrowly for the Democrat, for Mary Perez. So this is going to go for 219 for the Democrats, Republicans 215. We do have a few more to go through. West Virginia will remain the same. The state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin, which just a few days ago announced they will not be redrawing their congressional map for 2026. Still, there are 2 House races to watch for. Brian Steele in Wisconsin 1 and Derek Van Orden in Wisconsin 3. I think Brian Steele holds on and wins Wisconsin 1. Derek Van Orden is going to be in for a tough fight in 2026 in this district. It voted for Orden by 2.7 in 2024 after voting for him by 3.7 in 2022 and 2.7 for the Democrat kind in 2020. I again expect this race to be very close, but I do think Derek Van Orden will narrowly lose this seat in 2026 to the Democrats. And lastly, Wyoming will go the way it is, being a safe Republican win. So right now, for July 1st, my current prediction for the 2026 U.S. House map is the Democrats do end up narrowly taking back the U.S. House of Representatives from the Republicans, but I don't think it's going to be a massive wave election where the Democrats win every single toss-up seat. I think it's going to be more of a case like 2022 and 2020, where the Republicans and Democrats both win some toss-up seats, but the Republicans took a narrow majority. I think for 2026 right now, the Democrats and Republicans will split a lot of toss-up seats, but the Democrats will win a very narrow majority in the House, 220 to 215, the current composition of the U.S. House right now, but flipped for the Democrats now being in the majority. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think about this House map. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in a future video.